I noticed the first shadow, the way a sailor notices the change in wind, without trying, without reason, with that sober certainty that something invisible has shifted against him. The shadow was not on a wall, but in a routine. My wife, Lila, laughed at dinner with that bright, bell-clear laugh that made strangers forgive our age gap and friends pretend they didn't count years like coins. She set down her glass, brushed a fleck of basil from my cuff, and asked about the old freighter anchored off the harbour. Harmless, charming. Yet later, when the house breathed itself into silence and the clock surrendered, her car slipped down the hill like a whispered secret. I watched from the balcony, robe cinched, palm flat to the cold rail, feeling the slow thunder of humiliation I would never show anyone. I'm Edward March, the man who buys buildings to solve problems. My skin is a map of storms survived and celebrations faked. I earned my first fortune on a river of canned goods and my second on a scaffold of patents. I built a home with more rooms than reasons. I filled them with art that made guests squint and nod. I never learned to forgive myself for the lonely noise of my own footsteps. And when I married a woman whose hair moves like water and whose eyes cut like clean glass, I made all the vows, even the secret vow men like me never admit, to be enough. She turned left at the pier, where the sardine plant used to rot the air on summer nights, and continued to Dock 17. The sign is new, but the bones are old. Corrugated steel tongue-tied to rusted beams, windows like missing teeth, a yard threaded with salt grass and secrets. No one goes there by accident. Drivers do what they're told. My driver texts me when the world disagrees with what I want it to be. Tonight he texted one word, warehouse, then a pin, then nothing. I could have called, I could have trusted. Men who build empires have closets full of could-haves, and they all smell like mothballs and regret. I chose a coat, an old navy trench that still remembered storms, and took the city in long, deliberate strides. The harbour exhaled diesel and iodine. Gulls quarrelled for what the tide forgot. The wind filleted the last heat from the pavement. I reached Dock 17 and saw Lila's car tucked behind a stack of pallets as if shame could park. The building had a side door greased with use. A strip of light wriggled under it like a trapped vein. I pressed my fingers to the old metal and felt the hum of something alive inside. That's when the second shadow arrived. Voices, distant, submerged, as if the warehouse itself were a shell you could hold to your ear and hear a future you did not ask for. A woman laughed. It wasn't Lila. A man cleared his throat with the authority of someone paid to do it. Someone rolled a cart, rubber wheels, muttering secrets to the floor. I told myself I came to protect what was mine. That was a lie. I came because silence in a marriage like ours becomes a weapon sharpened by time. I came because I feared what I would see more than I feared what I already was. I wrapped my hand around the handle and a memory struck. Lila's voice last week, soft, distant, asking if I believe people could hold two truths at once, the one they live and the one they hide. I opened the door a breath's width and saw a gallery of sins waiting to be named, but the worst was yet to come. Introduction, plus, call to action. The story of how I got to that door doesn't start with romance or scandal. It begins with numbers in a ledger and a city that knows the price of everything and the cost of nothing. Port Halcyon has always been a bargain struck between hunger and ambition. I learned its tides as a boy, loading trucks behind the cannery, hurling cases until my arms sang. When I was 20, I promised myself I would never be poor again. When I was 50, I promised the same in a different language, philanthropy. Schools with my name, labs with my portrait, scholarships for young women who could read a balance sheet like poetry. When I was 70, I married Lila. The tabloids sneered, the internet joked, the dinner invitations multiplied. I told myself I didn't care. Some lies are beautiful enough to keep. Lately, Lila carried a weather inside her. Quick flashes of lightning behind her smile, a small rain of silence in rooms that used to be loud with us. The small fractures began where all fractures do, deniable, meetings that ran late, earrings that returned to a different dish, a floral scent I didn't recognize, whispering from her hair at midnight. She slept with her phone like a relic. If you have never felt invisible in your own house, you have not lived long enough or loved hard enough to qualify for the tragedy of being human. My security chief, Yara, loyal because she doesn't sell the truth and doesn't buy the lie, told me 4 nights ago that one of our cars had been accessed after midnight and returned before 2. She said it the way a nurse tells a priest that the patient is awake and asking for absolution. I delayed, not out of virtue, out of vanity. If I pretended not to know, perhaps the truth would retreat like a tide. I detest the arithmetic of denial. You always end up paying interest. Tonight, I chose the opposite of denial. I followed. I tell you this with my voice steady and my heartbeat unmasked because I suspect you felt the same cold bloom in the chest. If any of this sounds familiar, if love has made you brave enough to be afraid, then listen closely. I won't embellish what I saw, but I will arrange it so you hear what matters. I will not drag anyone through mud they did not earn. I will not trade pain for spectacle, but I will tell you precisely how a man like me, with every tool for certainty at his disposal, stepped into a room built for doubt and found something more dangerous than betrayal. Before I open the door wider, hear this. Stories like mine are rarely about the headline. They're about the footnotes, the receipt tucked in the wrong pocket, the freckle you never noticed on a loved one's wrist, the key on a ring that doesn't belong to your house. Think of your own thresholds, the places you promised yourself you wouldn't go and then did anyway. That first step has an echo. I'm still hearing it. I suspect you will too. If you're hearing me now and you want to follow this to the end, stay close. I will walk you through the dark and I won't let go. Subscribe so you don't lose me when the power flickers. Share this with someone who keeps secrets they aren't ready to name. Leave your mark so I know you're there when I must choose between pride and truth. I am not teaching you anything. I'm inviting you into a night I would pay everything to forget and a lesson I would never sell. The door is still only a breath open. The light is still a thin blade across the floor. My hand is still on the handle. I haven't yet learned that some warehouses store more than goods. Some store the parts of us we mislaid and the debts we pretended weren't ours. I widened the gap and the smell hit me. Salt, machine oil, and something sweet, almost domestic, like orange peels simmering. I heard my name, not spoken but brushed against, if he finds out. I told myself I would leave if I saw anything unforgivable. I lied again, because the truth is unchanged by our readiness to meet it. I slipped inside, and the door closed behind me with a whisper that sounded too much like a promise. But the worst was yet to come. Conflict. The warehouse was not empty. It was arranged, curated almost, with an attention to tenderness that made my suspicion feel vulgar. Along the left wall, a procession of long tables ran under a chain of hanging bulbs. On those tables, rows of neatly stacked boxes, each printed with a logo I recognized and despised for how quickly it turned my throat dry. My foundation's crest, the compass and laurel I'd approved a decade ago when I thought philanthropy could launder a conscience as easily as it launders publicity. The boxes were labeled with tidy black stamps: medical supplies, EDU packs, warmth kits. In another life, I would have been proud to see them multiplied. Tonight, the multiplication accused me. Past the tables stood a screen cobbled from canvas and plywood. On the screen bloomed photographs, projected from a small machine like those in classrooms. Faces of women and men and children as clear as lamplight. Dock workers I'd seen through limousine glass. A teacher I'd cut a ribbon with. The fisherman who lost 3 fingers the year the bank foreclosed and still waved like a king from his skiff. Their eyes didn't plead. They witnessed. A hand scrolled through images. White notes bloomed in the margins and vanished. The person scrolling was not my wife. I moved along a canyon of crates, the soles of my shoes clicking time to a drum I hadn't ordered, and found a ladder rising to a narrow catwalk. From up there I could see the whole geometry of the operation. Near the back bay, a group assembled. A woman in a denim jacket with her hair braided tight, a man in a tweed coat, odd for a dock, a kid, no, a young man, nervous energy like sparklers. And then Lila, in a plain grey sweater I'd never seen, sleeves pushed to her elbows, hair pinned up with a pencil like a girl who did homework on the kitchen floor. She was issuing instructions in a tone I knew from recipes and wedding seating charts. Competent, soft, no room for debate. "Boxes 8 through 12 loaded first," she said. "They go to the truck with the false floor. If there's a check post, you keep your hands where they can see them. Smile. If they ask who you work for, you say the truth. March Foundation. You say we couldn't get a signature tonight and we'll return in the morning. Won't that backfire?" Tweed asked. "It's the truth that behaves like a lie," Lila said. "It buys time." I wanted to march down there and demand names, reasons, apologies that would decorate my anger and keep me warm, but a sound to my right froze me. A door whispering shut, a guard passing beneath with a thermos, a flashlight sighing across the floor. I crouched until my knees argued. The flashlight slid past and turned my fingers into bones on the metal grating. I felt old. I felt young. I felt like a fool. Below, Lila stepped to the screen and switched the projection. It wasn't photographs anymore. It was documents, purchase orders, shipping logs, inventory reports with my CFO's digital signature leafed across them like a counterfeit saint's autograph. "Here," Lila said, "missing pallets, ghost transfers. The freighter sitting off the harbor tonight is a mouth. We've been feeding it for months." "Stealing?" the kid blurted. "Redirecting," Lila said. "From theft back to need. From a deal made in glass rooms to clinics without windows. From men who take to children who lack. But we can't keep doing it this way. He has to see." "He?" Denham's braid stiffened. "You mean your husband? You said—" "I said I'd try before I broke the glass," Lila answered, eyes on the documents. "I've tried. I mapped the rot. I followed it to the office where they stamped his name onto everything good and quietly sold the rest. He lost track of the rooms they invented in his house. He doesn't know the doors. He needs a key. I'm here to make one." I hated the accuracy. I hated that I had keys to every building I owned and none to the story of my life. The kid tugged his sleeve. "What if he won't listen?" "Then we go public," she said, the syllables landing like stones in water. "But that is the last resort. I won't feed him to wolves. Not even if the wolves wear suits cut with his tailor's scissors." I remembered the scent in the air. Orange peels. On a back table, a pot steamed over a camp stove. Lila poured mugs and handed them without ceremony to people who were, by every definition I'd learned in boardrooms, trespassing. The kid sipped, calmed. The guard with the thermos laughed softly with Denham. I had come here to drag my wife from a betrayal. Instead, I watched her hold a room together with warmth and evidence. My anger reared like a wounded stallion. It didn't like the saddle called truth. It wanted the old ride, confrontation, dominance, a verdict delivered from height. She turned off the projector and the darkness folded back in. 2 trucks, Lila said. "No heroics. If we get stopped, I'll speak." She ran fingers over the stack of documents as if blessing them. "We are not thieves. We are returning what was stolen." Tweed asked the question I should have asked. "And if Edward discovers this, discovers us, what then?" Lila looked toward the catwalk, toward the darkness I believed was absolute. For a second I thought she had found me, and the warehouse spun on a new axis. I had the ridiculous, tender impulse to stand, to fix my coat, to descend as the man in portraits and say, "Explain this." Instead, I tightened my grip and listened to my wife tell strangers who she believed I might still be. "Then we tell him the whole thing," she said quietly, "because the worst truth is always kinder than the easiest lie, and because if he's lost, I want to be the person who leads him home." Aye, the words struck me like the bell of a ship, vibrating all the way down into my keel, and yet a stubborn, frightened voice whispered, "Or she is leading you somewhere you cannot return from. Choose fast. Choose hard." Below, a shutter rattled. The guard swore. A second flashlight swept the loading bay. The trucks weren't due yet. Another crew had arrived, uninvited, unannounced. The kind of men who stand too straight to be tired. The kind who let you see their guns without showing them. My breath shortened. My world widened. I realized the scope of the game and how late I was to it, but the worst was yet to come. Climax. They entered like a cold front, quiet, inevitable, rearranging the air. 4 men, matching jackets without logos, boots that didn't squeak. The leader's face was the sort of handsome that dies in fluorescent light. He had a widow's peak and a posture that apologized for nothing. He scanned the warehouse once and pinpointed the tables, the crates, the screen, the camp stove, my wife. It was not confusion that touched his features. It was confirmation. "Evening," he said. "We're here for the March consignment." Tweed took half a step forward and found the rope of Denim's arm stopping him. Lila didn't flinch. "You're early," she replied. "Someone changed the schedule without telling me." "Schedules change for people who matter," the leader said. "You know how it is." His hand made a lazy compass across the room. "This won't take long." "No," Lila said. "It won't." She reached for the projector remote, and darkness swallowed us again. She pushed a button and light cleaved the warehouse into clarity and proof. Pages bloomed across the screen, shipping manifests annotated with red circles, procurement requests with destination fields quietly altered, signatures that any second-year law student could see were pasted from a prior file. The men didn't turn their faces away. The leader smiled with his mouth but not his eyes. "Cute," he said. "You're about to steal from the March Foundation, and by extension from every person on that screen," Lila said. "If you walk out now, we can pretend this was an audit. If you load those boxes, the story changes." "Whose story?" the leader asked, amused. "Yours." "His," Lila said. "The one with his name on every crate." He snorted. "He doesn't even know where he keeps his keys." The line landed like a knife, tossed to a chorus of nods. I felt the insult crack something inside me I hadn't realized was brittle. The catwalk vibrated with a truck rumbling into place outside. The guard whispered into a radio and got silence back. Denim's jaw set, as if about to chew iron. I had a decision to make. The kind with nothing afterwards that isn't consequence. I could descend and use my name like a badge, hoping it still opened doors when the lock was made of men. Or I could retreat and call Yara, unleashing the machinery I keep for nights when lines must be drawn in legal ink. Either way, time had no patience. The leader flicked 2 fingers, and his men angled toward the crates. Lila moved, not toward them, but to the side door, the one I had used, and threw it open. Night exploded into the warehouse, the harbor wind shouldering its way in with gulls like hecklers. The men glanced instinctively toward the noise, and in that sliver of attention, I stood. "If you are lucky, you will live long enough to choose the truth while you are still afraid." "Stop," I said, my voice a dry branch snapping. It carried anyway. Heads tilted up. The leader's smile cracked. Lila looked at me, and for a breath, the whole architecture of our marriage balanced on a thread stretched between her eyes and mine. "Mr. March," the leader said, "didn't expect to see you working nights." "I'm not working," I said, descending, steps ringing, coat unspooling behind me like a banner. "I'm waking up." I reached the floor and stood beside Lila, the kind of silence that decides people spread out over us. The projector hummed. The kid swallowed audibly. Denim's hand landed light as a question on the edge of a crate. "Those are mine," I told the leader. "You know it. So why do you look at them like you're doing me a favor by taking them?" He shrugged. "Because we all work for the same sun, Mr. March. Some of us just stand closer to it." I stepped closer. "My name has been used to ship supplies off my docks, to a boat that belongs to no one I would break bread with. My signature has been copied. My foundation is a costume worn by thieves, and you presume the man inside the costume is asleep." I nodded toward the documents. "He is not." The leader's jaw flexed, a tiny earthquake of options. "You won't call the police?" "No," I said. "I'll call worse. I'll call the board." He laughed then, a sharp, unpleasant bark. "The board?" He leaned in so close I could smell mint and something medicinal on his breath. "Sir, the board signed off." The floor lurched under me, not because the building moved, but because a plate inside me finally shifted to align with the facts stacked like bricks around us. I replayed signatures, phone calls unanswered, an empty chair at a gala, a CFO who started using first names like favors. The betrayal wasn't downstream, it was headwaters. "You're going to leave," I said. I didn't raise my voice. "You're going to leave now, and you're going to carry a message." The leader smiled again, but the room felt him calculate. "And what message is that?" "That I remember where I keep my keys," I said, "and the locks are changing." He tilted his head. "You think you can change a system while standing inside it?" "I built systems," I said. "I know where the seams are. I know what happens when you tug." He looked past me to Lila. "You brought him here." "No," Lila said. "He brought himself." Something in that exchange dislodged the last pebble in an avalanche ready to fall. Outside, the truck idled. A second set of lights painted the rafters white. Yara's SUV. I hadn't called her. She had made the calculation any good guardian makes. When the perimeter moves, move first. Two of my people stepped in. No guns, no swagger, just that particular precise stance of professionals who know replacement is expensive and mistakes are louder than victories. The leader studied the math and found it unprofitable. He lifted his hand, a conductor ending a funeral march. "Gentlemen," he said, "we're done here." He took 3 steps, then paused, almost generous. "For what it's worth, Mr. March, you didn't lose the plot. You delegated it." He left, boots whispering, jacket brushing a crate that belonged to me again. His men left after him, like commas trailing a sentence that wasn't yet finished. The warehouse took a breath. Sound returned. Wind, gull, generator, someone crying without embarrassment. I turned to Lila. There are apologies that don't fit in words. There are questions that need the dignity of daylight. I was about to choose one when she placed a folder in my hands. Its weight was exactly the weight of my denial. "Read," she said, "then decide who we are." I opened it. Not at random. At the first page, stamped with the name of a man I had mentored and protected, a man who sat at my right during votes and at my left during funerals. The ledger entries were neat. The theft was neater. In the margins, Lila had written dates, witnesses, warehouses like this one, and beneath, underlined once, "We can tell the truth and survive it." Behind me, Yara said quietly, "Sir." I didn't look back. "We'll need statements," she added, "and to move the inventory." "Move it where?" the kid asked, voice small now that the temperature had changed. "To the clinic first," Lila said, "then to the school, then to the women's shelter. We'll log every box. We'll make it public if we must." I nodded because I had no other honest movement left. I lifted my eyes to the screen where faces waited. They did not accuse. They asked. I've always had trouble with questions that require me to be smaller than my legend. Tonight, I managed, but the worst was yet to come. Desfecho, plus CTA News, travels in cities like ours the way grief moves through a family. Everyone knows before anyone says it aloud. By morning, whispers collected around my gates like fog. I spent the dawn at a table in the warehouse, sleeves rolled, pen moving, Yara orchestrating statements, Lila orchestrating decency. The trucks ran like arteries, carrying what had been promised to where it was needed. We counted twice. We signed in ink I could smell. We photographed everything. We made copies of copies, because a truth not documented is a rumor dressed for court. By noon, I sat across from my CFO, whose face I had once trusted to convey bad news gently. He tried to stage a misunderstanding, a rounding error, a supply chain anomaly, a vendor hiccup compounded by ambition and mitigated by intent. I let the attempts exhaust themselves like a wave against rock. Then I placed Lila's folder on the table and watched defeat arrive at last. Quiet, inevitable, rearranging the air, the way those men had arrived the night before. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't perform. I terminated his contract, froze accounts, summoned auditors who don't smile. And then I made the call I had dreaded, a statement to the press that named the failure and the repair, that turned my portrait from a shield into a window. The board tried to muster its old magic, postpone, process, dilute. I surprised them by stepping aside as chair, not because I was finished, but because I intended to be dangerous. I formed an independent council, staffed not with donors, but with the recipients of our services. Every quarter, they would audit us in public. Every shipment would be trackable by anyone with a screen. We cut 3 programs beloved by press releases. We tripled the budget for the clinic with the leaky roof. We turned the warehouse into a hub, staffed by people who had once waited outside locked doors. I watched a new geometry take shape, built on inconvenience and accountability, 2 materials I had avoided because they don't look good at galas. And Lila, what of Lila? We did not solve a marriage with a single night of truth. We began. In the hours after the confrontation, we sat on the warehouse steps and watched the harbour perform its old pageant. Ropes tensing, water making and unmaking diamonds, as if wealth were a game between light and movement. I told her the unvarnished version of my fear, that I had loved her as proof I could still move mountains and had forgotten to ask if she needed the mountain moved at all. She told me the unvarnished version of hers, that she had tried to open a door for me and worried I'd nail it shut with pride. We did not kiss like teenagers. We didn't cry like children. We held hands like adults who understood the math of staying. In the days that followed, strangers sent notes the way people send food after funerals, some sweet, some heavy, most made with care. One read simply, "Thank you for seeing us." It made me think of the night I watched faces on a canvas and understood that philanthropy without proximity is theatre. That line will sound neat on a plaque. It was not neat when it arrived. It exploded something inside me that needed demolishing. A man like me can spend his last years polishing his legend or repairing his life. I chose the second because the first is only dignified if no one looks too closely. If you have followed me this far, you know this isn't a story about an age gap in a glossy magazine. It is about the distance between who we say we are and what our silence permits. I won't claim heroism. I walked toward the warehouse thinking I would rescue myself from humiliation. I left it with the far harder task of rescuing myself from comfort. That work does not trend. It changes rooms. It changes how you use your keys. It changes who eats because you decided a signature meant something again. I'm asking you to do something with this, not for me, but for whatever in your world has been moved into the shadows because it helps the powerful sleep. Share this if you know someone who needs courage tonight. Subscribe if you want the next chapter when the auditors publish and we either flinch or don't. Leave your mark so I know who walks beside me when my old habits try to kidnap me back into applause. If you're a person who benefited from a system built to hide costs, ask yourself a question I didn't for too long. Whose receipt are you ignoring? A week after the confrontation, I returned to Dock 17 at dusk. The door still sticks on humid nights. The walls still sing with the sea. The tables bore new boxes, labeled with destinations I could pronounce and forgive. Lila was there, hair tied with a piece of string, laughing with denim, arguing logistics, pouring tea that smelled like oranges. She looked at me the way a person looks at a horizon, not expecting land, but ready for it. I walked to the screen, touched the corner, and watched the projector paint the canvas with faces again. Not a gallery this time, a mirror. This part is not dramatic. It is better. I turned to the crew and said, if anything here begins to look like a secret again, tell me before it turns into a headline. The kid grinned. Tweed bumped my shoulder like a brother. Yara exhaled the kind of breath captains release when the storm has passed, but the deck still glistens. We carried the crates together. We logged and lifted and learned the weight of promises. And yet, even standing in the center of this repaired room, I know the truth about tides. They return, temptations too. Pride waits like a rehearsal. The board will try again with a smile that suggests compromise is grown up and accountability is naive. I will be tempted by the warm bath of appearance. That is why I am telling you this here aloud, so strangers can hold me to what I said when the night was honest, when the door was open and the wind made liars of us all for a second and then made us new. Remember this, the warehouse was never the villain, it was the vault we turned into a window. If you have one like it, an attic of unsent letters, a laptop folder labeled later, a friendship you keep in the dark because the light might cost you, name it, open it, inventory it. Put faces on the screen. Make the thieves explain themselves in daylight. It will gel your blood at first. It will explode your tidy myths. And then, if you are as lucky as I was, it will hand you back the keys to a house you thought you lived in alone. I left the door open when I walked out. The harbour wind pushed past me, impatient and alive, as if the city itself were eager to sweep the last dust from corners we had ignored. I turned to Lila. "Let's go home," I said. She nodded. We walked into a night that felt less like a secret and more like a start, but the worst was yet to come.